Welcome to the premature edition of Soul Food Coffeehouse Astrology Night for August 2015. Normally we are here the first Wednesday night of every month, and we're here a week early because next Wednesday night I will be giving a lecture at Lilydale, which is the home of the Spiritualist Church in the United States, about an hour outside of Buffalo. And anyone who's watching this on the internet and lives in the western New York, Erie, Pennsylvania, Cleveland area, Rochester, New York, Buffalo, New York, and wants to attend, go to the Lilydale site and look for the Astrology Roundtable, a weekly event, and I will see you there next week. So, we are here on July 29th to talk about the month of August from an astrological point of view. And before I jump into the month, I have two things I want to mention. One is, as many of you know, because I've been talking about this for several months now, I will be leading a 1-week-long, 8-day actually, retreat in Bali, Indonesia on September 20th through the 28th. And there is still room if you're interested in attending that. Airline fees are, I would say, ridiculously low, but that's only comparatively because airline fees seem to be ridiculously high all over. But it's cheaper from Seattle, at least these days, to fly to Bali than it is to fly to London or Paris. So, and it's not that expensive for a week in paradise, spending a week with me learning astrology. So that is September 20th to the 28th. If you're interested, please either call me, send me an email at rlevine, L-E-V-I-N-E, rlevine at stariq, that's S-T-A-R-I-Q, stariq.com. I'd be happy to talk with you about it, or go directly to stariq.com/Bali and find out more there. Okay, that's one of two things. The second thing I want to mention in passing before we actually get into what's going on this month, and we have some juicy stuff this month, is I just want to mention that astrology has lost another 2 lights in the global astrology community, one just a couple of days ago and one this past month. And the 2 people who have passed on, one is Maggie Nalbandian, who's was the founder of Astrology et al., which was perhaps not only the premier astrology bookstore and school in the Northwest, but maybe in the country. And Maggie was the founder and owner of NORWAC, which is still being run by her daughter these days. And Maggie was also the initiating factor of Kepler College, which was established here in Seattle also. Maggie passed away last month, and just a couple of days ago, you know, in this day and age, I don't know whether you are like this, but I have some people in my life who I consider to be really good friends, but I only see them once every year or 3 or 5 even, but I still consider them to be good friends. And one of those good friends is a man named Christian Borup, who is probably the greatest living astrologer in Copenhagen or in Denmark. And Christian passed away this week. I happen to have been with Christian and his partner Branko when they met in Edinburgh. I don't even remember how many years ago. And so these are 2 lights that the astrology community has lost, and I just want to mention them in passing, while I also mention Jeff Jower, who many of you know accompanied me here on this stage for some 7 years prior to his passing back in February. And so it's just important, I think, to keep people's names, memories, and images alive, because they still are. Thank you. Okay. August. I have 4 things I want to talk about tonight. 4 words. 1, blue moon. 2, peristalsis. How many people know what peristalsis is? Okay. How about borborygmus? How many people know what that is? Okay, we'll get there. Blue moon, peristalsis, blockages, and that goes along with peristalsis, and reversals. That's the theme for August. So let's get this out of the way. The Marcells, sometime in the 1950s. I couldn't tell you when. All right, so we have a blue moon coming up the day after tomorrow. Technically, my contract says I'm not allowed to talk about things that are outside of the month that we're addressing. What contract? Come on. And theoretically, we are talking about August, but we're 2 days away from a full moon. And I just want, and many of you who are on the internet, who are on Facebook, probably have seen things floating around about how incredible this moon is because it's a blue moon. And the question is, WTF, question mark. What is a blue moon? Well, a blue moon has nothing to do with astrology, and it has nothing to do with the importance or the lack of importance of a full moon. By definition, and there's a couple of ways of looking at this, the old Farmer's Almanac called the 4th full moon in any one season a blue moon. The modern interpretation is the 2nd full moon in any month is a blue moon. Now, how can this be? The lunar cycle is about 28 days, 29 days. What that means is that if we have a full moon on the 1st or 2nd of the month, we can have a full moon on the 30th or 31st of the month. And in fact, that was the case in June. We actually had a full moon at the beginning of the month, and therefore we have a full moon on July 31st. The importance of a full moon is the importance of a blue moon is identical and not different from the importance of a full moon. There's no difference. It's like if something occurred on a Tuesday versus a Friday. The days of the week, although they may be named for the planets, are still basically a man-made artifact thrown over these natural rhythms. The new moon and full moon are natural rhythms, and they're very important in the biological and emotional cycles in which we live, whether we pay attention to them or not. But whether or not there happens to be 2 full moons in the same month is just a freak of the calendar, because it doesn't make one more special or not, because it's still going to happen at the exact same frequency and the same time. It's still going to happen, 4 weeks after the previous one. So let's just take a quick look at the full moon that is coming up, even though it's technically still in July, and we will get to August in just a moment. But this full moon is a full moon in Aquarius opposite the sun in Leo. Now, the sun likes being in Leo because in astrology, every sign relates to a planet and every planet relates to a sign, and the sun relates to the sign of Leo. I mean, this is the sun at his glorious best. It's the summer sun that's unrelenting. It shows up every day. It's high in the sky, and we can feel the warmth as we can this evening. We can see things. When the sun is out, there is an objective reality. This is a Leo kind of energy. The flowers are in full bloom. That's what Leo is about. It's the energy is apparent, obvious on the surface. It's the gold energy that is not only the color of the sun, but it's gold as it appears here on Earth. And to the ancients, the metals weren't representatives of the planets on Earth. The metals were the planets on Earth. And so gold becomes the sun, like silver the moon, and Mercury, and copper, Venus, and iron, Mars, and tin, Jupiter, and lead, Saturn. Okay, so we have the gold as the sun, and this is the same gold that's in the lion's mane. It's the apparent outward manifestation of light in its beauty. We have the Sun King. The sun is the center of our little party that we have going on here, our solar systemic party. And all the planets are running around the sun going, "You are the god, you are the center. We bow down to you gravitationally because we can't escape." So Leo has to do with the center as the center of the light, of the energy. And in the physical body, the center is the heart. And Leo relates to the heart. Leo is heartfelt, and it's love. It's the personal, playful, romantic love of "I love you." That's what Leo energy is. And interestingly enough, we come back to the theme of metals and the planets. Gold is required in the body for life. Very minute, very minuscule amounts of gold, but gold is found in its most densest quantity in the heart. This is crazy. I mean, the heart of gold is not made up. It's a real thing. In fact, homeopathic physicians will use homeopathic amounts of gold as a heart remedy. So, we have the sun this time of year in Leo, and before we get back to the full moon, I should mention that we actually have a bit of a Leo party going on, and Leo likes party. It's a playful energy. Leo is the inner child, the outer child. Leo is that spontaneity of playfulness in a fixed and determined manner. Nothing's going to stop a kid from playing. Nothing's going to stop the sun from shining. Nothing's going to stop love from expressing itself. Now, well, except for Saturn, and we'll get there in a minute. So, we have the sun in Leo, we have Mercury in Leo, we have Jupiter at the very end of its year-long stay in Leo, because Jupiter is a 12-year cycle, and it spends 1 year, roughly, in each sign, and part of what August is about is witnessing the annual change of Jupiter, and it's moving from Leo to Virgo, and we'll have more to say about that in a moment. But we also have Venus, which we'll have a lot to say about in a few moments, because Venus has moved through Leo and on into Virgo, but Venus just turned retrograde a few days ago, actually on July 25th, I believe. Where's that date? Somewhere here. Is that right? July 25th. Yeah. Venus turned retrograde on July 25th, and in fact, on the same day as the full moon, Venus retrogrades. It moved into Virgo about 2 weeks ago, and it's moving back, retrograding back, changing signs. If we move this ahead just a couple of hours, there's Venus moving from Virgo back into Leo, increasing the energy of the Leo party. And we'll also talk in a few minutes about Mars, which has been in Cancer for a couple of months, and Mars will be moving into Leo to energize and to boost the energy of this Leo party. Got this? All right. This is fun. Are we having fun? No. Why not? Saturn. We'll get there in a minute. It's Peristalsis, baby. We'll get there in a minute, too. All right. So, we have the full moon is the time each month when the moon is exactly opposite the sun. So, if we have the sun in heart-centered, radiant, warm, brilliant Leo, the moon has to be at the full moon in the opposite sign, and the moon is in Aquarius, which is as far away from the heart-centered sun's favorite place to be as the moon can get. So we have the moon in Aquarius, and the moon actually isn't thrilled to be in Aquarius. Why? Because Aquarius is far away from the heart. It's far away from the center. And the moon, although it's not the center like the sun is, it's close enough to the sun normally that it creates the basic response and reflection to the sun. The moon is our feelings. The moon is our matrix, our mother. It's how we're connected to the material world. It's our bodies. The moon is basically how the soul lives inside of our bodies, and so it becomes very close to home. And the moon is, in a way, each of our individual homes. You know, if you go to India and you ask someone what their astrology sign is, they live in a very different culture, and their astrology is feminine, as their calendar is lunar-based. And so someone will tell you their sign as their moon sign. How many people here know their moon signs? All right, so the next time, what's your moon sign? Everyone. All right, so the next time mine's Cancer. I'm in Aries with my moon in Cancer. So here's a game for you. The next time someone says, oh, what's your astrology? Tell them, I'm and fill it in with your moon sign, with my sun in, and then put your sun sign. So I'm in Aries with a Cancer moon. But if I were playing this game, I would say, I'm a Cancer with an Aries sun. It'll make people go, why? You see, we arbitrarily place importance, and obviously the sun is important. If it went out, so would everything else. You know, it's like if the light of the sun went out, there would be nothing for the moon to reflect. However, we lose the fact that the moon is closer to our bodies and our everyday lives than the sun is. The sun feeds the energy, but the moon in Aquarius is not the center, like Leo. Aquarius, in fact, is as far away from the center as you can get. Okay, someone might make a case that, well, Pisces can be even further away, but that's more in a mental image. What I mean is that Aquarius is not about the light energy. It's about the systematic distribution of that energy. In our body, Aquarius is our nervous system. It's in fact it's all the systems. It's anything that spreads the energy around and gets it to the distant places and back. So we have the moon in Aquarius. Aquarius is anything but heart-centered and emotional. And in fact, the moon can be a little bit weird in Aquarius because it's a bit emotionally detached. Now, this is neither good nor bad. Everything in astrology has its benefits and its problems. But the fact is that moon in Aquarius has us responding, because that's what the moon does, it's how we respond. It has us responding, instead of on a personal level, I love you. It's responding on a level of, I love the planet and I want to make sure it survives. There's a global, you can say, community function of Aquarius that takes the individual and it makes it a cell in the larger system. So the full moon in Aquarius is really about how the individual energy in Leo can be reflected and used for a wider sense of consciousness, and the question becomes, what can we do for the good of all? It's that Aquarian energy that reflects the feelings in a depersonalized manner. You know that people often say, "Oh, don't take things so personally." Well, most people say, "Don't take things so personal," which makes me and the adverb police go crazy. Because you can't take something personal. It's an adverb. You can take something personally. But the grammar police just entered my brain, and now I'm pushing them back away. All right. So you've heard the saying, don't take things so personally, which often is a good idea because we do tend to over-personalize things, which makes our lives more difficult. However, if we took nothing personally, we would be in bad shape because we wouldn't be taking responsibility for our role in our immediate environment. And so there's a balance between the Leo and the Aquarius energy that is apparent right now at the full moon. Now, let me ask a question. How many people here over the last few days have had what you would consider to be a harder than normal time, and just something going on? I mean, I've been getting this from every nook and cranny of my life, not only in my own life, but from clients and from friends, and people have been telling me difficult stories over these last few days. And now I want to talk about peristalsis. Peristalsis is the process that the body uses to move things along in the colon and in the esophagus. And it's this kind of process. You've probably seen or can imagine a picture of a boa or some large snake eating a frog. I know you've all seen on YouTube of the snake eating a house or something that was obscenely big. But you know how you got that bulge inside? Well, the way the body processes that along is by this kind of rhythm of expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction. In our colon, the food that we've eaten and has gone through the stomach gets moved through the colon with a contraction and an expansion afterwards. And that contraction expansion continues to move things along. Got the image? Jupiter is expansion, Saturn is contraction. Astrologically, Jupiter is the planet that makes things seem bigger. It grows things. It's considered to be the greater benefic. It's good because it takes something and makes it into something bigger, which is wonderful. Well, unless you're trying to lose weight, or unless you're trying to get rid of cancer proliferation, or unless you're trying to deal with the overindulgence of some habit that may be wreaking havoc on your life, or so on. In other words, I said this before, too much of a good thing isn't always a good thing, but Jupiter doesn't care about that. Jupiter just makes things bigger, better, more, and it's expansive. Saturn, on the other hand, is the planet of contraction. And again, sometimes contraction or pulling back is just what the doctor ordered. Sometimes pulling in and getting serious allows us to do the work that we haven't been doing. Or it allows us to follow a law. It allows us to not get the next speeding ticket. Or whatever it is, because Saturn is the limits and the rules, and we pull back, we contract, we get smaller, we get more serious, and I'm thinking of the Steve Martin line of the "Let's get small." Do you remember that? There's that thing of of pulling in Saturn. Not always because we want to, usually because we have to. We have no choice. Saturn is like hitting the wall. So what I want to talk about for a moment as a background to what's going on is we have Jupiter moving through the late degrees of Leo, and it will actually move into Virgo on August 11th, which is an important date in this scenario. But as Jupiter gets close to the end of Leo, it will reach 28 degrees. Actually, let me advance those days so you can see how this thing works. There is on August 11th, there is... Oh, that's not right. Oh, August 11th is when it moves into... there it is. There's Jupiter moving from Leo into Virgo. But if we back that up to August 3rd, that's what we want. Okay, so if we back that up to August 3rd, Jupiter at 28 degrees of Leo is making a square to Saturn at 28 degrees of Scorpio. All right. So the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, just like the new moon, full moon cycle, which we're familiar with, the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is another rhythm of culture, of growth, of life, and it's about expansion and contraction. Jupiter is expansion, Saturn is contraction. Every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn line up, kind of like a new moon. Jupiter catches up with Saturn, and from Earth's point of view, there's a conjunction. 10 years later, they're opposite each other with Earth in the center, and it's kind of like they're at their full moon phase, and it's Jupiter-Saturn opposition. 5 years in between these conjunctions and oppositions, Jupiter forms a 90-degree angle, a square, like a first quarter moon, but a square. Jupiter forms a square with Saturn. So here's the way it works. And if you meet anyone who says, oh, I don't believe in astrology, you can tell them, oh, so you don't use a calendar? Okay. Because the calendar is astrological. Obviously, a month is a month. And a year is the amount of time the Earth takes to make one complete cycle. That's an astrological rhythm. But interestingly, our idea of the decade, which is 10 years, is an astrological rhythm because Jupiter and Saturn form their conjunction. The conjunction is the beginning of any cycle. And Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct in, 1900, 1920, 1940, 1980, 2001, 2020 they will be again. But every 20 years, they line up from Earth's point of view on the same side of Earth. And then on the off years, in 1910, 1930, 1950, 1970, 1990, and 2010 and 2030, there's a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. It's why every decade has a different feeling from the decade before, and they often go in feelings of both politically and economically and culturally in 10 years of expansion, 50s contraction, 60s expansion, 70s contraction. Do you see what I'm talking about? It's that same, it's peristalsis. It's expansion, contraction. Now, when Jupiter and Saturn are working well together, when they're harmonized, it's like everything seems to be happening at the exact right rate. However, when planets are 90 degrees to each other, as Jupiter is 90 degrees to Saturn on August 3rd. But we're not talking about a one-day energy. We're talking an energy that we've been feeling for a week or so and will be feeling for a long time to come. It's difficult to manage our expansion and contraction, our Jupiter, our growth, and our Saturn following through on the things that we said we'd do last month or year or decade. And so what happens when Jupiter and Saturn are square, like they are now, is that we have conflicts or stresses in our life, either from moving too fast, Jupiter, if you blow up a balloon too much, it pops. And so Saturn comes along and squares it and goes, you better stop blowing air into that. In fact, you better start sucking some air out of that so that you can have that place where you can maintain this rather than having it be so unstable because you went too much. by the same token, we have Saturn that's been making things serious, and Saturn has been retrograde. Remember, Saturn moved into Sagittarius, and Saturn backed into Scorpio in mid-June of this year. Saturn turns direct in a couple of days, actually 3 days, on August 1st, and it moves back into Sagittarius on September 17th. So we have Saturn in its backward-forward process right now, having moved from Scorpio back into Sagittarius, where Jupiter is squaring it. And so we have this whole conflict between how much is enough, how much is too much, how much do I need to hold back, how serious do I need to take things. That's what's up right now. And that would be plenty all on its own, except because of the nature of how these planets move, Jupiter's moving faster than Saturn, and Saturn will basically turn direct, and then Jupiter will turn retrograde, and these guys will move in and out of this exact square again on March 23rd, 2016, and then again for the third and final time on May 26th of 2016. So we will be revisiting the issues that we're facing right now, both personally and economically, globally, and socially, of this whole dance between expansion and contraction. Now that would be plenty all in its own. However, we have another major piece of extenuating circumstance, and that would be Venus. Okay, so last month, if you were here, you probably ended up outside in the back field with me, looking at Venus and Jupiter that were conjuncting in the nighttime sky. It was beautiful and brilliant, but what's happened now is that, let's bring this back to here. There we are. What's happened now is that Venus and Jupiter, because the sun gains 1 degree a day, they've moved closer and closer to the sun, so that when the sun sets, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus are so close to the brilliance of the sun, and especially in the northern hemisphere now, where we get a lot of twilight, we can't even see Venus anymore. You might catch a glimpse of it right at sunset, whereas a month or two ago, it was hanging in the sky at night for an hour or so, and you just couldn't miss it. So what's happened, though, is that Venus, which lined up with Jupiter, about a month ago on July 1st. Then Venus turned retrograde just a few days ago on July 25th. Venus will line back up with Jupiter again after she... let's get this going the right way. There we go. After she backs into Leo on August 3rd, by August 4th, Venus and Jupiter will be lined up again. Now remember, Venus is the planet of love, desire, beauty, harmony, sweetness, sugar. Anything that's yummy is Venusian. And Venus is more. So tell me, what's wrong with Venus and Jupiter lining up? Huh? Well, most of you should be saying nothing! But the fact is that, as we said earlier, too much indulgence, too much of anything, too much sugar even though a little bit is sweet, too much will kill you. Okay, maybe any will kill you. That's another story. But the fact is that Venus and Jupiter together in ancient astrology and in modern astrology is a sweet deal. It's propitious. It's auspicious. It's a harbinger of good things to come. And if we look back at that period when they lined up the first time, back at the beginning of July, we might see a seed that was set or sown that now, as Venus is retrograde, we might be revisiting that from the other side of the coin. We talk a lot about Mercury retrograde because Mercury is the planet that retrogrades the most often. It retrogrades 3 times a year for about 3 weeks at a time. Well, Venus is a rare retrograde because it only retrogrades every year and a half or so. And when it retrogrades, it stays retrograde for about 40 days, which is twice as long as the Mercury retrograde. And in some ways, I think Venus is a more serious retrograde to deal with, because rather than just affecting us on the intellectual, mental level, which is what Mercury does, although it's very noticeable up there, Venus hits us on a deeper level. It hits us on the level of our senses, of our aesthetics, of our body, of what's working and what's not working. And I would suggest that for those of you who've had some sort of difficult stuff over these last few days or a week, is because Venus has been slowing down and, in fact, turning retrograde. And that in itself can be difficult. But there's more. And we're going to come back to Saturn. So I said early, we're going to talk about peristalsis, blockages, and reversals. So Saturn is boundary. Saturn is walls. Saturn is apparent blockages. When we, what did the fish say when it swam into the cement wall on the river? Dam. Saturn is dams. You see, dams aren't necessarily bad unless you're a river flowing to the sea and you hit it. Then it's no fun at all, because it stops the action. On the other hand, what a dam does is it allows you to build up energy, just like a capacitor does in an electronic circuit. It stores energy for releasing later. And so Saturn is a blockage. It blocks the flow. Now, we talked about earlier the blockage or the stoppage of Saturn and Jupiter, the expansion-contraction process of peristalsis, right? But remember, we talked about Jupiter squaring Saturn, which is a rare. I mean, Jupiter conjuncts, squares, or opposes Saturn every 5 years. Meanwhile, Venus, which takes about a year to go around the zodiac once, would line up or square Saturn, would line up with it once a year or twice a year and square it twice a year. It's not as rare. But what is rare is that as Venus is conjuncting Jupiter, they are both squaring Saturn. And even though this aspect isn't exact yet, and the exact dates on this are the Jupiter-Saturn is exactly square on August 3rd, and the Venus conjunct Jupiter is exact on August 4th, and the Venus square Jupiter is exact on August 5th. The fact of the matter is, we've already been feeling it, and especially when Venus turned when Venus turned retrograde on July 25th, that was kind of like a hello, but we've even been feeling it for days prior to that. So this is what's going on. This is the blockage. This is, man, everything is as cool as it possibly can be. Life is wonderful. Life is awesome. There's an abundance of yummy feelings. Jupiter is joined up with Venus. Isn't this great? Well, yeah, but Saturn says you can't go there. Saturn says hold back. Saturn says manage boundaries. Saturn says a dam is necessary so that this energy isn't just dispersed and flow away. You want to make sure that it lasts. Why? Because we're going to have another occurrence of this later on as we move way ahead, and I'm not going to move the computer there, but when Saturn turns direct and when Jupiter moves on, they're going to square again when they're in Sagittarius. And in fact, Venus, when she turns direct, Venus is backed up where over the next couple of days, at the day of the full moon, backs into Leo, and Venus turns direct. She stays retrograde all of August, turns direct on September 6th. But she's still in Leo, and she doesn't leave Leo until October 8th. So the party ain't over. Except we gotta play by the rules. we gotta pay attention to Saturn, because Saturn ain't gonna let us get away with any shit. Venus moves back into Virgo on October 8th, and although this is way far off in the distance, she squares Saturn for the third time on October 10th, and then joins up with Jupiter the third and final time on October 25th. Now we're at the far end of this whole scenario that began back in July, early July, when Jupiter lined up in Leo with, when Venus in Leo lined up with Jupiter in Leo. But now, the interesting thing is that all of this ends up with a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And as an astrologer, I like to look at the way things are, the way things unfold in relationship to time. And I think it's important that the last piece of this whole little sequence we just described is Venus's conjunction with Saturn. Now granted, Jupiter still has a couple of squares with Saturn later on, but that's a deeper, bigger issue than this Venus thing, which is about our current abundance with a limiting factor, Saturn, on it. And the more we can understand, and the more we develop a plan to work with that real constriction, blockage, dam of Saturn, the better and easier it will be in the long run of how this whole thing unfolds. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in this little list is reversals. And here I want to, we've talked about this a little bit with Venus's retrograde. Next month we have a Mercury retrograde. We have Mercury retrograde once every 3 months. But other planets retrograde also. And in fact, Uranus just turned Uranus. How come I don't have that on here? Uranus turns retrograde, did someone know this? It just turned retrograde. I'm not sure why this isn't showing on my sheet. And on top of that, we have, that's what I was thinking, on top of that, on August 1st, we have Saturn turning direct. So remember, Saturn was in Sagittarius. It's backed up into Scorpio, kind of forcing us to revisit a lot of these intense issues of feelings and passions and control and power that perhaps we've been dealing with for the last couple of years as Saturn was moving through Scorpio. And Saturn turns direct, these issues start moving forward, and in fact Saturn moves back into Sagittarius in mid-September. We'll get there when we regroup here next month. The thing that I want to mention about reversals is this. They're a mystery. They were the thing that confused the ancients about watching how the planets and the moon and the sun move through the sky, and then arbitrarily planets would stop and go backwards. I want to share with you a poem that I wrote about retrogrades a number of years ago, just to help you understand how confusing retrogrades actually are. Heavenly forms, gods and spirits, abstract and transparent metaforms. There, the chief cook, commander supreme, looks down upon earth from multi-dimensions into the earth plane. She, or he, stirs the slowly thickening soup, cosmic spoon in one hand, magic wand in the other. Round and round, stirring and stirring, again and again and again, always the same way round. Concrete forms, humankind and technology, earthbound and solid. Here, a spectator. We, spectators, solitary in thought, look up from these 3 dimensions into a multi-dimensional universe, watching the watching the spinning wonders. Astrolabe in one hand, quill pen in the other, round and round go the planets, consistent and perfect in their orbs, always the same way round on their journey encircling the sun. But no. What? What in heaven's name is this? Obvious cosmic imperfection. Systems within systems distort perspective. Orbital space and time relatives stop and step on logic, as if to scrape the stickings from the bottom of the cosmic soup pot. Apparently arbitrarily, perceptually inarguable. The planet's reverse direction, even if only from Earth's point of view. And for a millennium, even longer, this was the ultimate Rubik's Cube. The wandering of some stars, the movement of these planets, the meaning of retrograde motion. Think Ptolemy, how can this be? Think Galileo, can you learn more? Think Kepler, can you solve this mystery? Think Newton, what strange forces are at work here? Think Einstein, can you put the cube together? In abstract metaphysical realms, the unimaginable, unknowable chief cook licks the spoon, gives a few quick stirs against the normal motion. Whirlpools form within whirlpools. Vortices of energy stir up past visions and perturb the divine regularity and cloud the forward movement of time. Earthbound, we watch the cosmic dance, trying to comprehend what we, in our cellular wisdom, already know. So, thanks. Thank you. Save your applause. Just send money. So retrogrades are confusing. They always have been. And yet now we have Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and we understand the mechanical nature of it, but we don't really fully understand what happens because time isn't as straightforward as we would like to think it is. Time actually warps, turns backwards. It hits these whirlpools, these eddies, these vortices, and all of a sudden what we thought was last month is next month. The thing is that when planets are retrograde, and I know those of you who have attended these astrology nights or listened to them online regularly know, because I've said this again and again and again, and that is when any planet turns retrograde, it's closer to Earth than at any other time in its cycle, so its energy is louder. There's nothing wrong with Venus retrograde. It's not really moving backwards, although it's certainly forcing us to look at stuff in our own charts where it's either hovering or covering that ground again. If it makes aspects to our birth chart, then those events that happened when a planet was moving direct, when it moves retrograde and direct again over that point, it's going to basically, it's like driving down a freeway and seeing your exit and getting off and going, cool, and then driving some more and then seeing the same sign and you're in the wrong lane and go, wait a minute, I just got off at that exit, and then you have to do it again and again. And often when a planet's retrograde, it allows us to see things from the other side, from the opposite perspective. And so again, for these days, going back to early July, it's what can we look at now to broaden our perspective, knowing that when Venus turns direct in early September, and when she moves forward and out of Leo and into Virgo by early October, then what's been going on now will make more sense. Okay, so let's move on and touch on just a couple of other things, because this really is the key, I think, to what's going on this month. Even though we can pull out the individual dates, it's really this. Thank you, computer. Okay, it's really this this cluster of planets now in Leo that through August and into September, one by one, move into Virgo. Remember, Venus was like the early warning. Venus was in Virgo, back into Leo. Then on August 11th, Jupiter moves into Virgo, followed by Mercury and the Sun. And meanwhile, Mars is kind of lagging behind the Sun. And Mars enters the Leo party on August 8th. And again, we'll feel the boost of Mars coming to that Leo party. But what's interesting is that on the day before Mars enters Leo, here we have August 7th, we have Mars at the last degree of Cancer, and Mars has not been happy in Cancer. Maybe be happy if it's, if he's been being fed soup and tea and being nurtured. But Mars is the warrior, and after being at home, meaning Cancer, the sign of protection and security, Mars is ready to go out and do something, ready to go out and conquer, some undeserving third world nation or something. But Mars is here on the 7th at the very last degree of Cancer, and we have 4 planets in Leo, with Mercury at the very last degree of Leo, and Mercury moves into Virgo, and Mars moves into Leo, almost like a replacement, like that science experiment where you have all the balls and you boom, and the far ball goes up, So it's like Mars moves in, or Mercury moves out, Mars moves in, but it's followed by Jupiter right behind just in a few days on the 11th. And so we're getting this energy of the party is getting better, but we have to pay more attention to the Virgoan details. Here we have Mercury moving from Leo into Virgo, and now we have Mars moving from Cancer into Leo, and now again it's the summer sun, it's the heat's back, and the energy is really building again. And interestingly enough, it continues to build until, again, here we have Jupiter and Mercury now in Virgo, and by the 14th we have the new moon in Leo. Excuse me, which there's the new moon in Leo, and the new moon in Leo, again, this is a big Leo party. There's another piece of all of this that I haven't really mentioned that I want to just bring into the discussion, because it's part of the upside of what's going on, and it's tied into this Leo new moon. And what it is not only all these planets in Leo slowly moving into Virgo, but Leo is a fire sign, and Uranus is in Aries, a fire sign, and we're getting this buzz of support from fiery Leo to fiery Aries. So, what I want to talk about is the trines of all these planets having moved through or still moving through Leo, as they, one by one, line up or harmonize in a fiery trine with Uranus. Now, Uranus has been in Aries long enough. It moved into Aries around 2010. And it's been in Aries long enough for us to know that the excitement of new things is cool. There's a lot of, we're on the edge of a whole lot of things. Things are different. Things are new. And I think that what's happening is that as these planets move through Leo, they one at a time harmonize or trine with Uranus. And this begins with, in this particular run, it begins with the sun and moon around the new moon harmonizing with Uranus. The sun actually on the 13th, but by the 14th, the sun and the moon are harmonizing with Uranus. And there's an excitement here, an anticipation of the future. We want to do it. This is Saturn squares are still kind of all cooking, but for a few days we're saying, screw Saturn, screw the rules, screw those squares. Is that alliterative? Screw those squares. I want to say squishy in there too, but it's not. But there's this sense of breaking through like lightning flashing and making something happen. And this new moon certainly has that sense to it. And yet there's still this square to Saturn that's there. We have one other thing that I think is a part of this month and plays into the new moon, and that is Mercury moving through Virgo. Mercury is comfortable in Virgo. Mercury actually enters Virgo. I know we said this once already, but we're going to just quickly jump back. Mercury enters Virgo on the 7th, on the 8th. On the actually, it enters Virgo on the 7th. And Mercury is at home in Virgo. Virgo is analytical, it's logical. Mercury likes being in Virgo. However, we have this little problem of Mercury's nemesis, in a way, Neptune. See, Mercury likes precision in senses. It senses things precisely. It is through intellect, which is the highest level of precision. And so what happens is that as Mercury moves through Virgo, it runs into an opposition with Neptune that's exact on the 12th. And this opposition really, it basically takes everything that we thought we knew as true, and it basically brings in the dream time, the dream realm, the imagination, uncertainty, doubt, confusion, misleading. It may feel like other people have misled us, or we've misled them, or misled ourselves. And so there's a bit of murkiness in here for a few days, but at the same time, we got this new moon cooking, which in a way is going to be like blasting through everything, and the lightning strikes and we go, got it, I see the truth. If it only lasted. But it is the truth, and this new moon, I think, is incredibly powerful because of that, because we're actually getting a chance to break away from what has been, and on top of that, we always look at the time of a new moon for what aspects the sun and moon are making. Well, obviously, they're making trines with Uranus, but they're also making a conjunction with Venus, retrograding back toward the sun. And that Venus retrograding toward the sun doesn't actually reach it until, let's see, we can do this. Oh, I jumped way ahead. Wait a minute. There we go. Venus retrograding back to the sun doesn't reach it for another couple of days. It reaches it on the on August 16th. On the 15th, Venus actually lines up with the sun. And so this new moon is really a new moon about Venus, the sun's and moon's conjunction with Venus, retrograde, trining Uranus. What does that mean? Uranus, new, different, out of the box, futuristic, emotionally detached in a way, which is odd because it's trining Leo, which is the heart center, and emotionally attached to the heart. And Venus, the planet of love, is there. This is a pretty cool and magical time, and I think it's a time where we can really make breakthroughs if we're willing to look back at old patterns, that's the Venus retrograde, and project at what might be in the future. Moving along, we get the continuing exodus of planets out of Leo. On the 23rd, we have the Sun moving into Virgo, and the Virgo time of year, Virgo is the harvest. It's the, in a way, I want to come back to the concept of peristalsis, because peristalsis mostly takes place, it takes place in a variety of the distribution systems in the body, including blood, capillaries, and including the esophagus, but it's mostly in the colon. And every sign is related to different parts of the body. And Virgo is related to the colon. Why? Because Virgo is about separating, what's that? Oh, that's okay. Virgo is about separating the wheat from the chaff. It's about separating the good from the bad shit. Literally. And that's what happens in the colon. In the colon, the good stuff, the stuff that meets the precise requirements of nutrients, are allowed into the body. And the other stuff is peristalsis. Can you make that into a verb? It's pushed along via peristalsis. By the way, I'm going to come back to the word borborygmus, which I threw out earlier, and it's just that I'm a word geek. Borborygmus is the Latin word, the correct word, for the sound the body makes when gases move within the body. So when your stomach gurgles, peristalsis is quiet. Borborygmus makes noise. Okay. But what's happening here is that as the sun moves into Virgo, Virgo is practical, it's down to earth. It's maybe the least earthy of the three earth signs, being Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. It's Mercury ruled. There's an intellectual component to it, but unlike Mercury, also relating to air signs in Gemini, where it's just about data, information, in Virgo, it's about information that's useful, has to be practical. How can I use this? Again, it's the separating the wheat from the chaff. And it's what's good to eat, the rest throw away. It's bad shit, send it on down the tube. So with the sun's movement into Virgo, and in fact the sun catches up with Jupiter on the 26th, this is like a major shift in energy. We still have planets kicking back here, Venus and Mars doing their dance. And incidentally, this is something we'll talk about next month, because Venus and Mars have done this incredible conjunction dance, which is a pretty rare dance, where it actually looks like they've been dancing or making love. They are the cosmic, consorts. They are the cosmic lovers. Venus being the consort of Mars, and they will line up for a third and final time later this summer. But I don't want to go there right now. I want to stick with the fact that we're moving the energy into Virgo, and the outward, happy-go-lucky manifestation of Leo's, I'm here, and I'm wonderful, it's summer, everything is great, it's beautiful, all of that, because, Venus is also in the picture. That as the month moves on and we move more and more into the Virgo time of year, we'll feel this closing down and the flowers going back to seed. You see, the energy is like a beginning of an indrawing of energy that gets ready for the next part of the cycle where the energy goes in completely. All right, so last two things I want to talk about. And there are certainly many other things to talk about. Oh, as we were talking about the planets that were backing up or moving forward and making trines with Uranus, remember Venus, which has been retrograde, on August 19th, Venus backs up and makes a trine with Uranus. This is a few days after the new moon, but Venus is still retrograding, moving backwards. And so there again, we're reminded of the unpredictable aspects of our feelings, our relationships, our attractions, our desires. This is Venus and Uranus, which basically says we can do this if we step outside of the box. This is an attraction to things that would normally be outside of your realm of typical, whether it's relationship or art or purchasing or aesthetics on any level. There's things of pleasure with that Venus and Uranus basically pull us into a larger sphere. Now, as the moon moves around, I just want to stop here briefly on August 24th again, because we have the sun catching up over these days to Jupiter, which is certainly propitious and nice. But we also have the moon in Sagittarius forming what I like to call a moving grand trine, meaning that the moon in one day is going to trine Mars, trine Venus, and trine Uranus, kind of getting that fiery energy buzzing. So this is August 24th. and that's the day after the sun moves into Virgo, and I would put that through the 26th when the sun lines up with Jupiter. I would put this on my calendar with a couple of exclamation points. In fact, as we reach the tail end of the month and move toward the beginning of September, as the sun and eventually Jupiter, but it's outside this month, as we move toward the full moon, what happens is that the sun actually lines up opposite Neptune. Remember earlier we talked about Mercury being opposite Neptune, and the imagination and the spaciness and the confusion and the misdirection, good news and bad news. Well, as the sun opposes Neptune on the 31st, and that would be the day after the full moon. Let's back up to that full moon. The full moon is on the 29th. We're right there. Let's go hours. And so here we have the full moon on August 29th. This is a full moon in Pisces. So we have the sun and Jupiter conjunct in Virgo. This is Jupiter in Virgo. We'll talk more about this over the next months because it's going to be there all year. But Jupiter's the biggest planet, and Virgo is the most narrowest field of vision. So Jupiter in Virgo is like a very big thing in a very small place. It's like a big opportunity if you can narrow and focus. It's Doctor Who, the TARDIS. Jupiter in Virgo. You go into a limited place and you have infinite. That's Jupiter in Virgo. But Jupiter and the Sun are still within a few degrees of being aligned here, and at the full moon is not only opposite Jupiter and the Sun, but it's conjunct Neptune as the Sun over the next couple of days opposes Neptune. This is a different flavor and defines the end of the month. It's like going to a party and everything is great and you're doing all your stuff and you have Saturn, Dad comes home and your friends are still there and whatever, and things are okay. But then at the end of the party, I don't know whether you've had an extra something to drink, or someone says, let's do some like Kundalini breathing and then lay down and someone will guide us in meditation. Something happens that takes it to the next level and we're somewhere else. Because Neptune is the god or goddess of the seas, of infinite consciousness. It's infinite space and time. It's imagination. It's the dream time. Neptune is everything that's surreal, which is why it's confusing. And the moon lined up with Neptune, as it does once a month, can be a few hours of total escape, going to a movie, losing yourself in a book, swimming, in the sea someplace or in a hot tub. It can just be yummy, or it can be totally confusing and disorienting because the moon, but it only lasts for a few hours. This month, when the moon goes across Neptune, it's the full moon which kind of imprints it stronger, and Jupiter is there too. So this is a very opening and expansive period of time, and I would encourage each and every one of you, all of us, that as we move later on in the month to resist the tendency of Virgo to close down too much and to keep a global perspective, because it's looking out at the distant horizon, it's looking at the tops of trees that will keep us in that uplifted place. And yet, because the Sun and Jupiter are in Virgo, we need to remember to keep our feet firmly planted on the ground. That's it. It's another month. That's, what's the old saying? Another day, another dollar. It's another month and another bunch of experiences. Thank you all for your attention. It's warm in here. Thank you to SoulFood for hosting this every month. And thank you to last month, 13,000 people watched this online. Thank you to all of you out in Cyberland, wherever that is, who support us. And thank you to the baristas, Tyler and Chris and Brian, the new guy on the block.